Thank you, No. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, No. Thank you, our leaders from both institutions for the opening remarks and share your insights on AGI. So now we will have 3 keynote presentations. Our first speaker is from Crystal Ball. Let me briefly introduce her. So Crystal Ball serves as Executive Director of the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, where she has worked since January 2022. In her role, she provides a platform for industry leaders to discuss common interests, explore differences, and collaborate on regional energy solutions. She also helps raise awareness of the Pacific Northwest's changing energy landscape. With more than 25 years of experience, Crystal has advised executives on state and federal energy policies, overseeing the implementation of the region's most comprehensive fish and wildfire mitigation program, and driven efforts to develop sustainable strategies for managing change. So now let's welcome her. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, and I assume this will advance my slides. I've got note cards. I don't know what that says about me and when I was born, but really appreciate the opportunity to share a regional utility perspective with all of you today. I just am honored to be here and Noel to learn about the partnership, and it gives me great optimism for our future, energy future, and for just the talent that you all bring to solving these energy challenges. This is a very hard time. It's interesting and some say a little fun, but it takes a very serious approach to getting these things right. And I just want to say to my friend Angela, who we have known each other for a long time. We were both in Washington, D.C., 2 young women there trying to figure things out, and our relationship and friendship grew over Energy Girl margaritas. That, my friends, is how you develop deep, lasting relationships in Washington, D.C. So let's get started. Wei told you a little bit about me, but one thing you should know about me, not in my bio, is that I'm passionate about bringing people together, and that is why I think I have found such a great fit at the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee. This is the place in our region where utility leaders come together. And this organization includes both the region's investor-owned utilities, like Portland General Electric, and also many of the public power organizations, and there are many in the 4 Northwest states, and industry partners like Energy Northwest. So it is a trade association for electric utilities and industry partners, but again, what you should know is it is bringing very different approaches to serving the energy demands of our region together, the IOU and the COU. And I'm grateful to lead that organization today. I do provide a platform for bringing industry leaders together, and we do that to find common ground and to work on solutions to the region's energy challenges. The purpose of my presentation today isn't just to tell you about how industry leaders get together, but it's really to focus on the product that the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee produces. And we do that to build awareness of the region's changing energy needs over the next 10 years. So some key takeaways that I hope you will remember from my presentation is that the load growth and needed future resources projections in this 2025 forecast are consistent with last year's forecast. But that was very different in 2024 than it was in 2023. Things are changing, but what we see this year is they're a little bit about the same as they were last year. Utilities in the Pacific Northwest are facing growing uncertainty and mounting pressure to add generating resources to keep the grid reliable. The third thing I hope that you will remember from this presentation is those resource additions are at great risk of not being deployed, and thus threats to reliability are increasing. When I gave this presentation recently to the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, what I heard at the end was, wow, that's really sobering. But again, I am feeling very optimistic about the talent in this room, and your being here, understanding these challenges, gives me, again, great hope. The fourth thing that I hope you will take away from this presentation is that natural gas and electric systems are increasingly interdependent, and so they need to be carefully coordinated and planned to mitigate reliability risk. And I see a lot of opportunity as we talk about the energy system in people working together to enhance that coordination and planning. I want to be clear about the approach we take in putting this information together and why we do it. I get asked a lot of questions about that, and people make assumptions about how this report comes together. It's never really what they think. It's pretty simple, really. The Northwest Regional Forecast is the sum of utilities' forecasts of loads and resources. It is based on rigorous utility planning for the future. And what we do is each year PNUC collects and aggregates data provided directly to us by the utilities and the Bonneville Power Administration. We do that to assess the state of the electric utility industry in the region. So this long-standing resource tracks power system trends, including shifts in demand, resource challenges, and emerging technologies from a regional utility perspective. So again, this information comes from the utilities. We put it all together so that we have a regional utility perspective. It's really important, and we see great value in tracking the trends from year to year. The footprint, so this isn't just about Washington utilities. This is about utilities primarily in the 4 Northwest states. So that's Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Because the region's power system spans many states, it is important that utilities, industries, regulators, policymakers, and academics across the Northwest states work together. It's great to see that approach to collaboration in the room today. All right, let's get into the data. I know people like data, and we try to put it together in a visual way. And if you haven't heard about this, then I don't know where you've been. But there's unprecedented load growth, and that continues to show up in this forecast. And like I said earlier, the 2025 forecast closely aligns with last year's projections. One cause of this significant growth in demand across the country, not just here in the Northwest states, is the increasing reliance on digital technology. So that's cloud computing and now moving into artificial intelligence. But another reason, and I really emphasize this, especially in Washington and Oregon, another reason for the forecasted increase in demand is the trend toward electrification. In Washington and Oregon, we have these policy mandates, and we are working hard as a region to transition to a cleaner energy future. That is going to need a lot more electricity than we currently use today. So in this chart, you'll see solid lines, and that's really what I want you to pay attention to. This represents the 2025 load forecast, and the lighter dashed lines depict the previous year's forecast. What's important about that is to just recognize the change in the last few years. So that dotted line, the small line there, that's from our 2022 forecast. I think that's right. But you see, just a few years ago, this demand for electricity was not growing significantly. A lot has changed in just a few years, and we need to keep up with this forecasted projection of increase in demand. I'm going to stay on this slide because we have the green line, which is the annual energy measured in average megawatt hours. But what we're really, I think, quite anxious about in the industry are the peaks, those seasonal peaks. And so we have put the winter peak in dark blue and the summer peak in orange. So on the green, most of the time, we have sufficient resources. It's really on those peak periods that we, as an industry, have to plan for that capacity need. And you can see that the peaks are growing. And another thing to point out here on a hot August day, right, is the summer peak is catching up with the winter. So as a whole, the Pacific Northwest is a winter peaking region, but summer peak is catching up to that winter. There's really not a whole lot of cushion anymore. And so we like to point that out, and that's just because our climate is warming, and people are using more electricity to stay cool during the summer. Oh, one more key point on this chart that I want to bring to your attention. Again, we get this information from utilities in response to questions that we ask them, but let's take a look. Right, this is a forecast. When we look at the actual data, we have evidence that demand is increasing on those cold days and hot summer days. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council, they reported in February 2025. Remember, this is not a cold winter, really. February 2025, a peak record of, in my notes I have that winter peak of 3,700 megawatts. Again, evidence that demand is growing. And then in summer, right here, the July 2024, I see Larry, I know he knows this. It was really hot in Portland and across the region in July. And I know PGE deployed a lot of demand response over that heat wave, but peak demand there was 3,300 megawatts for the region. Okay, I gotta keep up with the time here, so we're gonna jump into the supply side. And what I really want you to remember is that utilities are facing growing pressure to meet ambitious resource acquisition plans. But the success of these plans depends on many factors, including coordinated regional action. So the stacked bars here amount to the cumulative nameplate capacity for needed future resources by type for each year of the forecast. Again, this is based on utility plans. This is what utilities are planning for. So when we look out in 10 years and add it all up, utilities are identifying that they need a remarkable 30,000 megawatts nameplate capacity in 10 years. This is an extraordinary number of added resources to develop in just 10 years. And many utility plans rely heavily on wind, solar, and battery. So that's what you see showing up here is the wind in green and the solar, and then the battery paired with renewables or just standalone battery. We see a tiny little bit of peaking capacity at the bottom there. And to maintain resource adequacy and system reliability, especially during those peak period demands, significantly more wind and solar nameplate capacity needs to be installed than would be needed if these resources were more available. So that's why you see, when we add it all up, 30,000 megawatts of nameplate capacity. Utilities anticipate new utility-scale wind and solar resources will be developed either in region or delivered via high-voltage transmission from resource-rich areas, right? That's why we need a strong, reliable grid. However, project development timelines are getting longer. Local opposition has led to complex permitting and state-level siting processes. That's why we're going to hear from Kurt after me. And at the same time, transmission interconnection queues are congested. And then we have shifting federal energy policies that have introduced even more uncertainty. So these challenges underscore the growing disconnect between renewable energy ambitions and the infrastructure needed to deliver them. So we don't, in our report, really focus on what utilities have done. It's mostly that 10-year outlook. But we thought it was really important this year to take a look at what utilities have been able to do. And when we add it all up, utilities have added 5,100 megawatts nameplate capacity of new resources since 2020. So that's progress, and it's a lot of progress. Like I said, in the next 10 years, utilities are identifying that they need 30,000 megawatts of nameplate capacity. Wind and solar, they've dominated new resource additions, and combined small hydro, wind, and solar total 3,500 megawatts. So the majority of that 5,100 megawatt progress. We see most recently that battery, solar plus storage are becoming increasingly prominent part of the energy mix, and that's to support peak demand and optimizing renewable generation. So we get to see the changing resource mix when we put this slide together. But when we look back at the 2024 forecast for comparison, utilities projected adding approximately 4,400 megawatts of committed and needed future resources in 2025. However, those actual builds in 2025 currently only total about 1,200 megawatts, falling far short of the forecasted need. So again, these resources are at risk of being deployed, and the region really needs to be able to add a mix of resources to ensure that there is enough electricity during peak demands. And if utilities can't acquire the resources that they need, the Northwest could experience shortages, especially during extreme weather. All right, here is an interesting chart that lots of people ask us about. It's a little complex, so maybe I'll start with just orienting you to this chart. We put it together to observe the existing mix of available capacity during the highest demand hours of the year. So we have summer and winter. Again, existing capacity. So it doesn't include any of the stuff that I showed you on the previous chart on needed future resources. This is just the existing. And you'll see that hydro is on the bottom here, but we started at 10,000 megawatts. So just pay attention to that. It starts at 10,000 megawatts. As Noel said, we have Grand Coulee Dam. This region is blessed with abundant hydropower. If we started at 0, this chart would be super tall. So just pointed it out there. Focus on the gap between the resources and requirements. Those requirements assume a planning reserve margin to account for uncertainty in actual demand and generation. And that planning reserve margin is needed for extra capacity meant to cover uncertainties. The dashed line shows the forecasted peak load. So that dashed line is back on that forecasted load chart. And that again is the summer and winter peaks. Just to say, when we look at this, on the megawatt side, you think about what I said earlier on the summer peak, 3,300 megawatts right there. So, good now. You can see resources retiring from the existing mix. And then on that winter side, 35,700 megawatts. So, really a bit alarming based on existing resources to meet those peak energy needs. The Before I move to the conclusion, I'm going to stay on this chart. We talked about hydro, but I want to call your attention to the gray bar, and that is natural gas. Natural gas used for generating electricity remains the region's second largest source after hydropower. A lot of people know we have a lot of hydro in this region. What a lot of people don't think about is all of the natural gas that we use to generate electricity too. Natural gas plays an increasingly critical role in the reliable operation of the region's energy system. Because these systems are increasingly interdependent, they do need to be planned more carefully together to reduce reliability risk. And when I was listening to Noel talk about the partnership and the opportunities, I was thinking, what about that coordinated approach between natural gas and electricity? And I wonder how much research is being done there on the long-term planning of those two resources, and that might be an excellent idea for an academic institute to really look into, and would be very helpful, I think, to industry. As we make a transition, again, these systems need to be planned very carefully together, even here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a lot of hydroelectricity. So just, again, that natural gas electricity interdependency is increasing as we make this transition. And the direct use of natural gas is something we need to think about too, because it remains critical to meeting winter peak energy demand. It is cold in the Northwest, and we use a lot of natural gas to heat homes. And if we don't use that natural gas to heat homes, and we transition to electricity, we need more electricity. Then, thank you. The multi-day cold snap in January 2024, this was over the Martin Luther King Day holiday. It was very cold for a period of time here in the Northwest. It is the most recent example in a string of examples that caused a lot of anxiety in the industry. Meeting peak demand at that time required emergency operations and procedures, energy conservation, and significant electricity imports. It was like 5,000 megawatts on average over that, I think, 4-day cold snap. Just an example of that need to coordinate those two systems very carefully and how close the region is to an energy supply chain. So in conclusion, I want to go back to those key takeaways. The load growth and needed future resources, the projections in this year's forecast, they are consistent with last year's forecast, but it was a big change last year, and even a big change the year before. Things are changing, and we see a significant increase in, projected increase in demand, and therefore a need to add generating resources to keep the system, to keep the grid reliable. And utilities in Pacific Northwest are facing growing uncertainty and that mounting pressure to add those generating resources. Those resources are at risk of being deployed because of the obstacles to bringing new resources online. And threats to reliability are increasing because if these delays continue, the Northwest could face severe resource adequacy challenges. Again, that natural gas and electricity systems, they are increasingly interdependent. They need to be planned more carefully to mitigate reliability risks. The reason why I think it's great to share this regional utility perspective with all of you is because Pacific Northwest utilities cannot expand the region's energy infrastructure. It's not that utilities aren't wanting to add these resources to the grid to keep it reliable. They are doing what they can to add resources, but there are a lot of reasons why they don't get built. So it's going to take the collective will and effort of the Northwest, all of us working together, to acquiring and delivering those resources as quickly as possible. To ensure a reliable, affordable, resilient, and I love secure energy future, the region needs to work together and to build a mix of abundant resources. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll turn it over. Oh wait, are we going to do Q&A? Do we have time?
Maybe towards the end of the session.
End of session. I'll turn it over to her.
What an excellent keynote address. Thank you so much, Crystal, for setting the tone for the event, and we are looking forward to engage in conversation along these lines. Next, I would like to invite our next keynote speaker, Kurt Beckett. Kurt Beckett was appointed as Washington State Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council's chair in January 2025. The agency has an acronym of EFSEC. That's kind of what I was referring. Would be referring in the next lines. He brings nearly 2 decades of experience in management, environmental review, project operations, and organizational strategy to the position. Prior to his EFSEC appointment, he held multiple leadership roles in the private and public energy sectors. Kurt served as Chief Operating Officer at Strategies 360, working on wind, solar, battery storage, and hydrogen generation and manufacturing projects. He previously served as the Deputy CEO of the Northwest Seaport Alliance, a first of its kind North American marine cargo operating partnership, and Deputy CEO of Port of Seattle. He also worked as District Director for US Congressman Nor Dix and State Director and Chief of Staff to US Senator Maria Cantwell. He has previously served on the Washington State Maritime Blue Board, the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, the University of Washington Center for Supply Chain, Transportation and Logistics, the International Association of Ports and Harbors Climate and Energy Committee, and continues as the board member of University of Washington Tacoma Center for Urban Waters. So let's welcome Kurt for the next lecture.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Can you hear me okay? Well, let me thank Associate Lab Director Becca Dittman, who provided the full bio that is an embarrassment. Her prerogative as the director here. So it's also an honor to serve as the new chair of FSEC, and certainly want to acknowledge and thank my boss, Governor Ferguson, in the day-to-day as well as for his appointment. And I certainly want to thank, having received the support of Senator Binky and his colleague and his colleagues in the Washington Senate for my appointment earlier this year. So you've been told what FSEC is, but do we have a show of hands who knows what FSEC is? Okay. Welcome. The rest of you are normal. So we normally don't split people up, but I'm certainly not. And anyway, I want to give you a quick overview of FSEC because many people don't know what it is. Highlight a transmission programmatic ES that's coming out and chat a little bit how about all that relates to the energy transmission of the Northwest. And stay on time. There we go. So essentially, and I'll run through these slides. I've provided a few more just because I believe they're accessible to the audience, and so for those who want to dig a little deeper, they're there, of course, on our website. So essentially, the FSEC was created in 1970 to help resolve some conflicting local environmental regulations, and most importantly, to help integrate that permitting and really make it more supportable and sustainable for communities, especially smaller communities where large thermal generation, 350 megawatts and above, especially at that time, nuclear, coal, gas type plants. In the meantime, and certainly nuclear pipelines, refineries, so all those things. But in more recent years, FSEC's really been focused on the expanded authority to essentially do any renewables of any size that can come to FSEC. Hydrogen being an emphasis, and actually green manufacturing also being an authority the legislature has provided to FSEC. It's not one that I know is important to go to FSEC, but it can, so it's certainly a good option to have. Essentially, the key thing to know is that it's the integrated permit set for Washington State for all permits. That recommendation is made by the council. It goes straight to the governor. The governor can remand it or can approve it or deny it. And if it is approved, it goes, well, if it needs to be appealed, it goes straight to the Supreme Court. So that's one of the kind of superhighway, superpowers of FSEC that is unique to FSEC. And it also can do a few things that are irritating to particular local governments and tribes, which is things like overriding local land use ordinances. So ultimately, as you'll see here, the key point of the permanent members of the council, as far as each agency designates their representative, but it really reflects the integrated permit set for Washington, including for tribal consultation. There are certain federal water and air permits that are included in this. Usually the respective city agencies are providing their input to FSEC, but ultimately FSEC and its staff serves as the integrator, and the council has the ability to ultimately make certain changes in its recommendation to the governor in terms of what ultimately the project will be required to do or to not do. I think I may have covered really what we need to here. Again, different permits we have. Ultimately, the other key thing to know about FSEC is it is a swaddled degree place. So there are monthly reporting requirements for facilities that receive a permit. They have, at the time of the permit issuance, decommissioning and restoration is already baked into the site certificate agreement. That's our widget. That's what goes to the governor. And ultimately, things like, who's there to take down the solar field in 30 years, that kind of an inflation-based bond is already included in the FSEC requirements at the time that the permit is given, which a lot of folks just don't know. I won't unpack this too much other than to know that in terms of engaging with local communities, tribes, counties, cities, port districts, it can be utility districts, but usually it's the principals that also, I should have noted, have a voice on individual projects. So a county will have a voice and a vote on that project. A city, port districts can opt in, but they're a non-voting member. Other state agencies, I should have noted, can also join based on the specifics of the project. So if the Department of Health needs to be on board, the military department, they can also join the council for a particular project. Key thing is that we can do interlocal agreements with those communities that are involved in a project application. It doesn't mean they have to vote for it. It just means that resources can be provided to them in an agreement between FSEC and the applicant and the local agency. So we do try to resource our community participants accordingly. So, most importantly for today's conversation, the legislature, and I'm going to turn to a few more formal remarks now, just to make sure I get this right in my days. So the programmatic EIS for the state, the legislature directed FSEC to prepare a non-project environmental review of larger electrical transmission facilities with a nominal voltage of 230 kilovolts or greater. And one novel aspect from the legislature for this programmatic is that subsequent transmission project applications will have to be mitigated for any significant adverse environmental impacts considered within the IS, so long as they adhere to its recommendations. In essence, this means if an applicant follows the programmatic recommendations, the SEPA lead agency could not determine any impacts then rise to a level of significance as defined by SEPA. We'll talk about why that matters a little bit more in a second. So as far as the purpose and goal, to identify probable significant adverse environmental impacts common to all transmission projects and development mitigation strategies for them. Ideally, this will help interested parties identify methods of avoiding and minimizing significant impacts at the earliest phases of planning, so as to avoid expensive and time-intensive redesigns later in the process, and further burden our communities with extended, potentially confusing, extended comment periods. We're not against comment periods, it's just I find that the more that we have them, the more that, especially those who at times struggle to follow projects and participate, are then impeded from doing so that much more. SEPA lead agency and permitting agencies would be provided with a well-referenced and researched list of likely impacts and effective mitigation measures to be used in the review of proposed projects, ultimately resulting in a more comprehensive but quicker review process. So as far as the assessed resources, on the left two-thirds, you'll see those being typical to all SEPA reviews, and the right list includes specific resources identified for inclusion by the originating legislation, i.e. the legislature, and also included was a robust socioeconomic review specifically required by FSEC. And due to yours truly's great slideshow capabilities, you don't have a gold set slide up here, so my apologies. But FSEC is excited to be able to include this item, which I'll explain. And it reflects the legislature's direction to prepare maps and identify impacts for resources. Staff used a technology called GoalSet, and this program involves a 5-step process where geographic-based data from a variety of sources is incorporated into a single system. Resources are identified through data and assigned conflict indicator values, and then are combined into a single suitability map. These represent the first 3 steps of the GoalSet program. The final 2 steps require a start point and end point, after which the program will draw several corridor options based on pathways that will result in least conflict corridors for any or all resources. As this programmatic is not based on a specific project, the suitability map included within represents the maximum extent of the GoalSet program that we were able to develop currently. Our hope is that these maps will allow future applicants to complete the final 2 steps of the program based on their known points of interconnection with existing infrastructure, and be presented almost instantly with several route options that avoid the most sensitive resources. And I'll leave, I'm sorry, I said that, but I skipped that. But anyway, most importantly, if you want to talk with folks who have been doing this work, contact information is here. And Sean Green is another name that you'll hear who's been deeply involved in the work. And let me talk then about next steps so you can soon learn more. So the programmatic will be released publicly on October 1st. Will be a feature of the October FSEC Council meeting. And I should note that the Council does not approve the programmatic yet. It's just a function of the staff bringing it forward. And then we'll do our best as council members to highlight the good work that's there and how best to use it. Relatingly, certainly something I'll be advocating for, really for all 4 programmatics. I may have skipped over this, but there are 3 other programmatics that are out, and they're by the Department of Ecology: hydrogen, wind and solar, and battery storage. And so those 4 programmatics are essentially out, and I believe that we need to be, looking for the first mover, really in each, but I'll stick to my lane as FSEC, and that is how does the programmatic actually work? What are the quantitative and qualitative benefits to the applicants, tribes, local communities, and the broader public? In other words, are we achieving the value and time that we intended? The GoalSet analysis tool does seem to be very well received in comments we've received to date, and they have some capabilities that can soon be mapped into other resources and project areas. Washington Ecology and FSEC are closely coordinating on the larger rollout and engagement of all 4 programmatics, and we will have more details to share in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So now, let me turn to the larger road ahead. And so as with any organization, opportunities to improve, to further adapt, and meet emerging external demands while making space to focus on internal processes and people is challenging. And we at FSEC are dedicated to doing so, and we're doing it right now. With a new website launched in June that provides a much improved functionality and resultant transparency, hopefully. Completion in late spring of a rulemaking to address a few administrative issues within policy. And public release of the transmission programmatic on October 1st. The FSEC staff and I are committed to maximizing positive change using existing authorities and resources. But of course, there's more to do. One key item to flag for you in this regard is the intent to maximize the use of pre-applications. So this process is available today to FSEC applicants and is utilized, but can be a much more comprehensive phase that better achieves our intent to avoid and minimize impacts, promote earlier engagement of tribal, local, and regional considerations and constituencies, and help boost community awareness and general public engagement. As I mentioned earlier, FSEC really is an integrator of the state's energy permitting under SEPA. While the FSEC process needs to be as clear and consistent and timely as possible, it can bog down based on the input it receives. One related improvement we can make is to bring these larger energy transformation issues, which eventually, although usually very quickly, show up in permit issues, and bring these into our community conversations at an unprecedented level. So let me give you an example. How does the Washington Growth Management Act incorporate our state's energy strategy is a huge opportunity to bring our energy system and our local communities together. And certainly for those who are here with the Commerce Department today, I'll acknowledge, that's an issue that is not FSEX by any means, but it's one that certainly I think Commerce has done good work on. It's just that there's more opportunity between community level and the various policies that we're talking about today. So ultimately, why do we also want to do that? We want to do that to help inform what each community wants. And really, where do they want it? Where they can, have some choices earlier on. And in particular, it also helps an opportunity to explain the unexplainable, which is called the Northwest Energy System. It helps show the what, how, and why of that energy system that literally supports our daily life. So ultimately, what's the outcome we seek, and why does it matter? So the what is certainly, we need to achieve time-certain outcomes and using objective review for these issues, projects, and the associated purpose. The resultant atmosphere of certainty will build confidence that Washington is both a place of vision and action, help draw needed investment, and deliver on our shared vision for sustainability and economic prosperity. Why do we need this? Crystal pretty well summed that up. I think we branded the next wave as Mind the Gap for anyone who's traveled to the UK, by the way. So, at any rate, Northwest Energy Systems are pocketbook daily life issues, which if we can achieve more time-certain reviews and outcomes, because we can review, but if we don't decide, there's an issue. But if we do, and continue to do with as much transparency and clarity as we can, but ultimately to take action, timely action, what will we achieve? And we'll achieve affordability or at least more affordability for all Washingtonians, especially low-income, highly impacted, and middle-class people. Help reduce life, habitat, species, and extreme weather events, and propel our state's economic and climate transformation that's increasingly impeded by cost, availability, and transmission of power. And lastly, number 4, will conserve finite and increasingly finite Northwest financial resources for maximum benefit by reducing corrosive effects of inflation caused by time and delay. So every dollar that we can find, the longer it takes to deploy it, the less we're going to be doing with it. And we all know, that in our daily life increasingly too, with attributing that to no, individual party or person, but it's just a fact that I think we all are seeing more and more. So, and how are we going to do this? The granular answers across the permit sets and processes are painful, and they are especially painful in some, and they are diverse, and they are big and small, and they're more interdependent than we often know. So there are plenty of issues still looking for solutions, so we will certainly need more new ideas, and science and technology always. But I don't believe we lack ideas to help meet our time-certain outcomes. We need to implement the ones we already have. And then we'll iterate, and we'll drive to the next cycle of improvement. Only with dedication and rigor for the details and the persistence to push through those details will we succeed in the execution. And ultimately, as Crystal used the word too, the real issue is to have the will. We don't lack ideas, we don't lack things to do, we don't have all of them. But I certainly believe we have a shared will to get it done, but we have to demonstrate that will. So I thank you for your time to let me share my perspective. I want you to know I am always eager to learn more about yours. So with that, thank you. I do sweat when I talk. I'm sorry. With that, I don't know if there's time for questions.
Thank you, Coach. We will have the Q&A at the end of this session. Thank you very much for the keynote presentation and sharing your insights on the Northwest energy transformation. So now we'll have our third keynote speaker from BPA, so from Jeff Cook. Unfortunately, he cannot attend in person today, but he will deliver a virtual presentation. So I hope, Jeff, you are online now. I see you, great. So let me briefly introduce you. So Jeff Cook is a VP of Transmission Engineering and Technical Service at BPA. He is responsible for implementing transmission services capital program, providing technical support for transmission maintenance program, and providing real property services to BPA. Jeff leads the design material specification coordination, project management, and energization of major transmission infrastructure projects necessary to sustain and improve reliability of the existing system and incorporate new energy generation facilities. So now let's welcome Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Oh, good, great. So I will jump right in. I appreciate the chance to speaking with you all. Sorry again for being remote on this. I'm right after this, I'm jumping on to another presentation here for our transmission town hall. So I had to do this remotely. So ask for forgiveness, not being in there in person, which I was. And also thank you to WSU and the labs as well for putting this on. Certainly, we work closely with the labs in various aspects of things. And certainly from WSU, we've worked over many years working with you all. We have an active student program where we pull students in from across the Northwest, and WSU is always one of our big contributors. Thank you very much for that. Bringing in the next generation of skilled employees to keep the lights on, so to speak, here in the Northwest. So thank you for your time. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the needs and challenges we have here in the Northwest is from the BPA perspective. As you heard from both Kurt and Crystal, a lot going on. Crystal certainly talked about the load growth. Certainly we're seeing that as well. I'll show you some numbers that kind of from a BPA perspective of what we're seeing. And it has not slowed down any. It's not linear, it's actually exponential type of growth that we're getting. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on as we run through the slide deck. But it is a growing economy out here. BPA continues striving to be the engine of the Northwest to make sure we're meeting those loads, accessing the resources, and we are truly very blessed to have the hydro system that we have here. It's been a great resource and continues to be as we continue to add on additional resources. So with that, I'll jump to the next slide, please. So what you have here, the map on the left here just kind of shows our overall system. The gray area is our service territory. As you can see, we span quite a bit of area. We have about 75% of the high voltage lines here in the west. And as we drive down the highway, I always look at the high voltage lines and just talk about how beautiful they are. My wife, I'll just say, does not share the same opinion, but I also always tell her, you like your electricity, don't you? So I get her to comply with me that way. We do have, it's on the right side, a kind of the breakdown of our transmission system. Overall, we have about 15,000 miles. So very extensive system that's serving a lot of the major hubs in the Northwest. One of the things I want to highlight down at the bottom there, you'll see our peak load, both in 2024 and 2025 in our BA or our balancing authority, and that's basically the area that we serve. You'll see it's about 11.3-ish to 11.4-ish. 2025 certainly not over yet. With the heat wave we had a week ago, I think we broke that 11.354 amount, but we're still waiting on the final numbers on that. But as you can see, it's pretty significant amount of load, and it continues to grow year over year. If you look back in time, back into 2020, 2021, that load has continued to grow. And as Crystal brought up, the big change is that the summer peak is catching up with the winter peak. So we're no longer just peaking in the winter, which we used to. And that presents a challenge on numerous fronts due to the heat and how we have to handle the transmission system due to ambient temperatures, how the resources perform under high heat as well as with our rules and statutory rules that we follow with the fish support and how we have to run the river during different months of the summer. So all that plays into how we have to balance that, working with the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Land Management and others as we balance the load with the hydro with the other resources that are coming on. All right, next slide. So just a lot of words here, but basically the big thing here is there's a huge number of requests coming onto our system. And as you can imagine, reliability, resiliency, and safety are critical as these new loads are coming on. And BPA has the obligation to do so, to have a reliable, safe, and secure system, not only for our staff and our employees, but also for the general public. So we spend a lot of time, a lot of energy into making sure that we can keep the lights on in a safe, reliable manner, as well as just the resiliency. And this, I think Crystal brought up as well, the wildfire has certainly impacted us and our capability over the last few years as we've seen more and more of those wildfires, and how fast, not only when we trip a line or a line goes out, how fast we can get that line back in, certainly for numerous reasons. So that's one of the areas that we're continuously making advancements in. Technology certainly is making advancements in that area as well, but something that we, from a utility, must constantly be looking at. Also, the big issue right now is cybersecurity. Certainly, as you listen to the news, you're certainly aware of that going on around the cyber world that we live in now. Certainly from a reliability standpoint, we constantly are monitoring that, trying to stay ahead of the bad guys, so to speak, as we're monitoring the grid and watching the grid. And under all this, we're trying to keep the system up and running, and our processes and our resources that we have today are certainly being stretched. Certainly BPA is certainly looking for additional resources going out. We certainly are trying to update our processes, which I'll talk about here a little bit later on. But those are all things that we're having to change and evolve as well in order to meet the high demands and high requests that we're getting into our queue, or our requests coming in from the customers. All right, let's go on to the next page. So just a little basic how things come into our system, or how requests get into our system. So on the left-hand side, and I'll go through these, we have 3 queues basically at BPA, as most utilities have. We have a generation interconnection queue where solar, wind, natural gas, etc. Say, I want to connect to your system. The middle one is a transmission service saying, I need to get from point A to point B. I have a resource in Central Oregon and I need to get to Portland. That just doesn't magically happen. There's wires in the air that they have to get across. So they put in a transmission service request queue that says, I want to get from A to B. And then certainly the line load side of the house, what you see is where the customers are coming and saying, I've got a 50 megawatt load, or I've got a 1 gigawatt load, or whatever that's coming in. And that load piece is growing, and I'll touch on these graphs a little bit. I'll start on the right. You can see that load graph is growing and continues to grow. In 2025, it's continuing on that exponential curve upwards. We mentioned earlier about the data centers, and we are seeing a huge amount of those, as you can imagine, in certain pockets on our system. And right now, roughly of our 24 gigawatts worth of line load requests, 18 of that is for data centers. So about 3/4 of our load is for data centers of some type. Now, I'm not an AI expert, probably never will be an AI expert, but with that coming on board over the next several years, we expect that continue to grow and even continue to accelerate as those requests come in for that type of service, as it booms out there for whatever use, AI, medical, you name it, is coming in play for. The transmission service requests queue, the one there in the middle, also has, as you can see, grew exponentially. Again, trying to support that line load request. So we had a lot of resources saying, hey, we need to get on, we need to get to Seattle, Portland, Salem, etc. And so those requests going from, we call them port to pod, port of receipt to point of delivery, has exponentially grown and continues to grow. And we're working through a sizable queue right now of over 65 gigawatts. So you go back, you don't need to go back in slides, but if you remember, our peak load was around 11 gigawatts, 11 and a half gigawatts. We have 5 times that, almost 6 times that now being asked to ride on our system. So that's a pretty significant increase in, and as you can see from 2023 to 2025, how that spiked up so much. So a huge ramp up. Likewise, on the generation interconnection, that queue is also exponential going up. We had at one time about 175 gigawatts in our generation interconnection queue. So again, our system peak load is 11 and a half gigawatts. We had 175 gigawatts trying to get onto our system. So it's simple math. You can't get that many megawatts onto a system that wasn't built for that. So certainly that's part of our challenge that we have in front of us. You can see it flattens out there later, and that's some of the things that we're doing internally to some reform that we have underway around this generation interconnection piece to kind of say, we're pausing that. We're doing some more studies around that to get folks on in a timely manner. But again, the main thing is how all these graphs are exponentially growing. And again, it's a huge challenge for BBA to handle. All right, next slide. So this just kind of demonstrates kind of how we're seeing things grow. As you can imagine, some with the retirements of some of the coal and gas and some of the new resources coming online, a lot of that is on the east side of the Cascades, represented by the letter 3 on the diagram here. And they're all predominantly trying to get over to the west side along the I-5 corridor. So high growth areas in Portland, Salem, Seattle, I don't need to tell you that there's various organizations over there, but there's a lot of growth going there. As we said, we've reduced a lot of the carbon emitting resources over 4 gigawatts, and many of them along that I-5 corridor. So that even creates a more increased need for that transport from the east side to the west side, putting a higher strain on our system going across. The other item that's kind of not shown here, but is very true, is with wind and solar and other variable resources like that, it's not a one-for-one replacement with natural gas or coal or some of those or hydro. For every roughly 1 megawatt of natural gas generation, you need 4 to 6 megawatts of wind or solar, because obviously, as we all know, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time. So you need either some type of storage or you need a diversification of those resources in order to serve that load continuously. So another huge challenge. And as you can see, those corridors that go from east to west, there's only a few slots, certainly along the river, the gorge, we have some. We have another slot up north and one down south. And I'll talk about some of the projects that BPA has initiated to help strengthen those and increase the capacity along those corridors. All right, let's go to the next slide. So some of the things that we're doing to help handle this huge increase, we're discussing, and I won't go into details on all this, but these are things that BPA is certainly looking at. Readiness criteria is really requiring that developers and others are ready to move forward. We get a lot of folks that are not there yet. They have an idea, they have a suggestion, but we are needing to move first ready, first serve type of thing. So you need to have your information. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at. We're looking at how we offer our LTF, which is long-term firm, is how we offer that to our customers. The NITS forecast, NITS is our network customers. Those are customers that are our core customers that we have at BPA. Making sure we get accurate long-term forecasts for those folks and how we want to handle that. And as Kurt talked earlier, permitting, siting stuff, it's not a 5 to 10 year process to build lines anymore. It's often a 10 to 15 year timeline for various reasons. For material, which is often delayed due to numerous things. Transformers, which we used to be able to get in a couple years, are now up to 4 years. Those type of assets are taking a long time to get. Permitting certainly has its time frame that we have to walk through as well. So building a substantial 500 kV or 230 kV line is a pretty drawn out process. So we want accurate forecasts early on as best we can so we can proactively plan the system, which is that kind of on the right-hand side in the middle. We're looking out 20 years. What is the system going to look out at far out? And so the more accurate the forecast, the better we can plan the system. And then we're also certainly looking at interim service. Is there a way that we can offer a service to some of these customers in an interim basis while we wait for the project or the line or whatever has to be infrastructure to be put in place in order to serve them? And then lastly, on the accelerated expansion, this is an area that we're working as well on to say, is there areas that we can lean the process out? Can we help, can we buy a lot of equipment up front that we think we're going to need, and then even though we may not know exactly where it's going to go, buy transformers or breakers or other type of assets up front? can we change some of our design processes and build processes, et cetera. So we're looking at how we can accelerate that expansion piece as well. All right, next slide. I also mentioned that BPA certainly has some numerous projects underway. Over the last several years, we've identified about 23 projects, and I won't go through each one. You could read through them. But in total, they're about $5.5 billion that these projects will cost. A lot of them, as you can see, up north is, again, getting from the east to west through that corridor. Down south, similar, there's an east to west type of corridor that we're trying to increase the capacity through. And a lot of these lines are moving from a 115 to a 230, or from a 230 to a 500 kV type of infrastructure. So we're trying to use the same right away, use existing right away, so we can optimize that, and then just increase the voltage so we have more capacity throughput. Likewise, you can see there's a path that's basically going from the Columbia River down south to the Oregon border. That's going to be about a 330-mile, 500 kV line that we're looking at building. Again, it's really to leverage some of the resources that are in the south part of the system, down in Nevada, Arizona, those locations. And likewise, we can provide hydro type of support to them, and they can provide some resources up to us during some critical times. So it's going to be a major north-south highway, if you want to call it, for transporting energy back and forth. So a lot underway. The goal is to have all these projects done by 2035, so about a 10-year time frame. So we've got a lot of work underway, all the while keeping their system going. We've got about 400,000 assets already in our system that we're trying to, keep them up and running, keep replacing them, maintaining them. So it's a big job across the whole region, building as well as keeping the system that we have up to upgraded and maintained and up and running. All right, let's go to the next slide. So just real quickly, talking about the funding and everything, and I mentioned it earlier, the sustain side, that's our system that we have in place. A lot of the stuff is older than I am, which is hard to believe, but there's stuff that's installed from the 1940s that we still have on our system, a lot from the 1950s. So obviously it's aging and we have to replace that. So our 25 sustain program is around $425 million. And that's just replacing what we have in currently in the system. For 25, also our overall capital program, which you saw those projects that were listed plus the sustain, is in the 700 to 800 million range. So we are spending significant amounts of funding, and our plan is to ramp that up, well, probably closer to about $1 billion a year as we get further down the road into the 27, 28, 29 timeframe. That number will continue to escalate just due to the fact of the load growth and everything else that we're seeing. And then just to kind of give you a flavor, that our SOI, which is our start of year budget for 26 through 28, is in that 400-ish range for our sustain side. And an error on there, I should put sustain. That's for our sustain budget. So again, it's a constant 400 to 500 million that we're going to be looking at spending on our sustain system alone. So a lot of growth, but a lot to maintain. So a lot of challenges in front of us. All right, next slide. So just in quick closing here, obviously BPA is got a lot of things, multifaceted. We have a transmission organization, we have a power organization. Under transmission, we do operations, we do planning, we do design. We have a control centers both here in Vancouver as well as one in Spokane. So we've got a pretty diversified network that we have. So we have a very high level of interaction with the other utilities in the Northwest as well, working collaboratively with them, working with the tribes, working with our customer base in order to keep the lights on across the Northwest. So a lot of balls in the air that we're working on, all the while trying to serve this increasing load while trying to make sure we sustain the existing system that we have. So not that we can't do it. We've certainly been doing, I think, from my opinion, a great job. The lights are still on, and we plan to keep them on even during these heat waves. As Crystal mentioned, they do stress our system. She mentioned a couple of heat waves as well as the cold spells. Things react differently in those different situations, but we have a great crew here, great staff here that is working 24/7 to try to keep everything up and running. So with that, I'll pause, see if there's any questions, but again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you all the keynote presenters for your keynote presentations. I think let's take a Q&A session before we take a break. So let's see if any questions from the audience. Wow, a lot.
All right, thanks. Jeff, I'll direct my first question to you, and then if there's time, I've got another one for Crystal. Thanks for the overview. Do you see anything on the horizon that you're concerned about with respect to Canada? Do they have their own load growth going on up there? Are we going to be able to depend on them less for imports in a pinch? Anything new on the Columbia River stuff with the water dispatch? So, what's your crystal ball say about the Canadian side?
So they certainly are seeing low growth up there. We work closely with BC Hydro and others up that location to make sure we're balancing our interties that we have with them. We're certainly looking at expanding the system possibly with them going forward as needed to help both north to south and south to north flows. The system has certainly changed how the flow is happening. As far as the Columbia River Treaty, I can't say a lot about that. Obviously, that's got some federal discussions are underway about that as far as how we proceed. Right now, we're proceeding very well with them as far as the water moving and management of that. Certainly more to come on that, but Canada is certainly experiencing a lot of the same load growth that we are and some of the same challenges. But we stay very closely tied with them through various organizations, not just ourselves, but through NERC and other federal organizations working with them.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So maybe next question. There.
Jeff, good afternoon or good morning, Larry Beckett-All. And quick question: you were showing your peak, and I'm assuming it's your load, your BA, at 11 gigawatts. Crystal was throwing numbers of 30 to 37 gigawatts. But I have to guess that you run a whole lot more of that 30 to 37 gigawatts across your system than just the 11 gigawatts. Do you have any feel for that? I mean, you have 75% of the transmission. Should it be a number more like 20 gigawatts that's running across your system?
Yeah, and thanks, Larry. And you weren't a plant either, but anyway, that is true. That is what we serve for our load, and yes, across our system, we're one of the main transportation highways across our system. Certainly, it's usually in the 20 to 22 type of amount that we are taking across our network. I did mention that we have some things changing on our network, dynamic line rating, which is where we're looking at our system. Can we push more through? Do we need to push less through based on certain conditions? So that's roughly where we're at. But yes, we do have a lot more that flows through our system, and we supply PGE and PAC and others so they can supply their load as well.
Questions to other speakers? Please introduce yourself.
Jeff, Sean O'Brien, your best friend from Tri-Cities. Back on that slide on grid access transformation, where you talk about things like accelerating expansion, proactive planning, interim service, et cetera. Can you help inform us how much of that is activities BPA's already been conducting versus new approaches, new initiatives that you folks are expanding on?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So another plant. Anyway, I would say all of that is underway. Some of it is certainly farther along than others. For example, readiness criteria. We've already started that about a year ago, kind of specifying what we needed to have in place in order to help us do those studies. The niche forecasting has been occurring for the last 6 months plus to talk with them about how we increase the forecasting capability and accuracy. But all of those things are underway right now. The accelerated expansion is probably one of the newer ones that we're looking at is what can we change today to lean it out in order to accelerate our expansion or our construction time frame. Certainly, we've got a lot of contracting work underway. We're going to be releasing a new contract here very shortly. That's going to double our capacity for construction. That 5.5 billion number that you saw is easily short of where we need to be. So we have a lot underway on the expansion side, and that's probably the newest one. We've certainly been looking at over the last 3-4 months, but something we're accelerating the acceleration of that expansion as well to try to figure out how we're going to get all this work done.
Thank you. Wow, really a lot of questions.
Hi, my name is Monica Brummer. I'm with the Center of Excellence for Clean Energy out of Centralia College. And I'm going to change the focus a little bit on people power. We know that some of our PUDs are going to experience a loss of 40 to 80% due to retirements in the next 2 years. What is your forecast, Jeff, and also Crystal? Are you working with another agency that's forecasting the workforce load? And are there graphs that tend to match as power needs increase, so does the need for workforce? So the question is, are you working with somebody on graphing that? And do you see a big growth in that area too? And how can we help?
I can take at least for BPA, and I would say working with our customers, and then Chris, I'll let you jump in. We see, yes, a lot of retirement, a lot of folks leaving. BPA certainly as a federal agency has gone through the shifts that have occurred over the last several months. BPA staff is down, and we certainly see the need to continue to grow to help support this load. We are certainly looking at contracting heavily. Our HR group is very actively engaged in looking at our growth patterns or staffing resources where we need critical staff. So they're working very closely all the way up the chain the federal level to determine how we can bring these folks on. But for this growth, just internally, we don't see that we can meet it without bringing on additional support staff from outside. So that's how we're looking at it. Certainly other IOUs, other municipals around the area, working with my peers, I see a lot of them also having that same struggle as staff are leaving or going elsewhere. So Crystal, I'll turn it over to you for other comments.
Yeah, thank you. We don't ask for that information about workforce, but PNUC members are concerned about workforce. I should add that to the list of why resources may not get deployed. PNUC members joined with the independent power producers and the Public Power Council to write a letter to Secretary Wright about the workforce concerns at the federal Bonneville Power Administration. We are concerned about a federal hiring freeze, and so I'll just add to what Jeff said. We know that BPA is going to be relying on contracting support, that secondary capacity model, and workforce is a very big concern. Also a place that we could use some academic research to inform what we need to do in the future. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and I'll add on one thing. We, as I know other utilities do, work closely with the labs to leverage their expertise to help us to supplement, as well as with EPRI. I know from a student program, we had to have a very active student program. We'll be ramping that back up. And that's another key area that for BPA that has been very successful with bringing on, because I don't know across the board, but at least from the engineering standpoint, about a quarter to a third of all of our engineers at BPA came through our student program.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So next, we have a great networking time, so please feel free to directly ask the keynote speakers your questions.
Yeah, I am Mani Venkata from WSU. I have a question for you, Kurt. You mentioned that you work closely with the tribes in some of these siting issues, and my question, and this is just out of curiosity, I thought the tribal nations are under federal jurisdiction, so how does the state agency kind of work with the tribal nations? So that was one question that maybe you can comment on. But I had one question for you, Jeff. I remember that you mentioned dynamic load rating as one of the aspects you were looking at for increasing the transfer limits. And I remember the north-south transfer was stability limited. So are you also looking at new controls or other initiatives to relieve some of those? And that would be exciting research for us at PNNL and WSU. So I was just curious whether you are exploring that as well. Thank you.
Jeff, this is Kurt. I suggest, unless you want time, you take your question first.
No, you go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
He'd have to repeat it for me, I think. So on tribes, ultimately we do our best to, always respect our obligations to the tribes, right? Whether it's the state or the federal government, it's complicated, to put it mildly. And of the 29 federally recognized tribes in the state, ultimately, whether it's 3 tribes consulting or 29, that's not usually the case, but you're going to have 29 different answers, or at least you have to have 29 conversations, right? Consultations as best you can. So that's part of the challenge, but ultimately there is, tension is the right word, but it can be tensioned at times, and that is, well, when is it a tribal right, and when is it the state of Washington's right? And so FSEC is an arm of the state, and hence we have to work under the statutes and policies of Washington state. At the same time, the tribal nations that we work with, their members are both members of that nation, they're members of the United States, and they're citizens in Washington. And so it is, again, which part of that citizen hat are we trying to interpret that day? So I don't know if I caught the rest of your question, but it's ultimately, I think the state goes a long way, but not enough by many tribal members' perspective to respect, what the tribes basically ask for, assert to their rights, including that they've lost a lot, right? So things like dams, continue on to this day, and other considerations, whether it's a renewables project or other, hopefully more baseload, generation that's coming. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So just real quickly on the dynamic land writing, I'm not sure if I caught all your question, but I think I did. So as we look at the system, obviously, if you increase flow or decrease flow, it has a ripple effect throughout the whole system. So obviously, we look at power flow studies, we look at transient studies, stability studies as we change those. The hope or the goal is that during a certain period of times, we can push more energy through those cables or through those lines in order to supply the load. But there's also a negative side when it heats up and gets warm outside, ambient temperature over 35, 40 degrees C, we have to potentially restrict the amount of flow. So those all have impacts across the system that we have to do those studies, as well as facility ratings. We have to look at if we are pushing more through this wire, is the arresters capable, is the transformers, the breakers, etc. So it's not an easy problem to solve. And when you tweak one area, it tweaks several lines away. So we are constantly trying to understand the impact from those adjustments that we're doing. And we've been very successful so far. We're really getting into that deeper now, looking at putting some technology out on the lines to help us get better data, so we can understand what the real impact is from those dynamic changes that we're looking at.
All right, let's thank all our keynote speakers once again. Thank you once again for setting the tone for today's rest of the day discussion. We'll take a break. We'll be back at 11 and we'll get started with the next session. Thanks, everyone.